activated!
Not that anybody's listening, but might I remind you that he is useless to us dead.
Alright, that's enough. Let him up.
Oh, done so soon? Oh, it's almost like that wasn't working.
How long are we gonna keep playing this game? He's not breaking, and I gotta clock out in an hour.
I don't want to hear it. We're gonna be here until the job is done. So you might as well settle in.
Joshua, I've calculated that you have a less than 0.2% chance of surviving this encounter. Would you like me to help?
Not right now.
Who in the world is he talking to?
Hypoxia is a hell of a drug.
That's not what's happening. He's not talking to himself.
Your determination is admirable, but unwise. This is what I was built for.
Come on.
Use me.
I can take these guys.
Alright, that is it. I've had it. No more games. Just the names. You are going to die tonight. It is up to you how. You either tell me what I need to know, or I will rip it from what is left of you!
Joshua, I can resolve the situation for us, but I need your permission to operate independently.
No.
You are going to pass out in approximately 10 seconds. If you want my help, you have to give me permission.
Help!
You have to say the actual words, Joshua.
Did he say permission granted?
Thank you.
They have guns! They have guns! They have guns!
I can see that. Let's get our own. You can close your eyes for this next part if you want.
Holy! There's still one more! Why did you stop? Why'd you stop?
I'm sorry, but this firearm is bio-linked to its designated officer, which prevents seamless semi-automatic fire.
Well, can you fix it?
Of course I can.
Oh my god.
Negative. I am no god, but I do play one sometimes.
Whoa! Oh, he's not dead yet. He's still here. He's really mad.
Aw, that is so cute.
Oh. Whoa.
Safety. That was me. Safety.
What about him? We can leave him, right? He doesn't look like a threat.
I am going to let you decide what to do with this one, Joshua. You are now in control again. If I may, perhaps you could use his net running skill set to harvest the data from your compatriot's shell, located in the body bag over your left shoulder.
Pull everything you can from him and do it fast.
This should be fast.
It's done. We got everything.
I recommend leaving the area as quickly as possible and take him with you.
I don't even know where we are.
That doesn't matter. What matters is that you follow my lead, Joshua.
Okay. Grab all that stuff. Let's get out of here. Quickly.
Officer Pinkman, I've detected catastrophic damage to your shell. Uploading your stack to the cloud for replication sequence.
Just let me die.
Death request denied. NIB Statute 10.175 requires you to continue until your contractual obligation is fulfilled. Commencing consciousness recovery now.
We are entering a brave new world of AI, digital ID, and inescapable surveillance that is managed entirely by world leaders, both known and in the shadows. And as technology grows, we have to keep something in mind. The tools are not inherently evil, out to get you, or doing the surveying. Humans, on the other hand, try to have good intentions, but as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So today, we are going to state some facts and ask some questions around the technology and governments as they mandate, intertwine, and grow. What are the benefits and pitfalls of AI, digital ID, and personal data, especially when it is infused and managed by world leaders? Yet, how you interpret this information will mostly hinge on how you answer the question, are humans naturally good or naturally bad? That is to say, do humans have to work in order to be good or bad? Now, follow-on question is, who gets to define what good is? And the reason that this matters is because behind every tool, authority, or technology is still a human wielding, governing, or designing. And every action leaves the fingerprints and the DNA of humanity on it. Now, we also have to remember that humans have a drive to protect, nurture, and create in selfless and in beautiful ways. But when power, money, and influence come into play, science and history tell us that humans tend to fail, especially when they think that they can get away with injustice. So what happens when technology allows other humans to read your mail, download your medical records, or track your habits, and then deny your rights simply because of your beliefs? Well, those things are already happening. So how do we proceed? We're gonna dive into all of this and more, but hit that sub button, and if you have any questions, Patreon is the best place to reach us. All right, before we move on, guys, we have to take a second and thank the sponsors that make content like this possible for free on YouTube every single week. So first and foremost, we have Wetworks. So for all of our nylon needs, Wetworks is our go-to. Even if you just want some scrim to go on top of your helmet, or if you're looking for a full split rig or a plate carrier that you need to get built out, go check out Wetworks. Next, if you're worried about Ring cameras, we're going to be talking about Ring later on in the video here, and you're trying to find them at night, best way to do that is with night vision, because they all have IR floods on them in the first place. So if you're looking for some good night vision, go check out Steel Industries. They have a brick and mortar facility in Central Florida where you can actually go try the NOS before you buy. Lastly, guys, we have Ammo Squared. So if you're looking for a good way to allocate some funds towards ammunition, whether it's for training or just stockpiling, Ammo Squared allows you to input your preferred dollar amount on a weekly or a monthly basis, and you can select your preferred kind of ammunition. I want high quality 308, I want training 5.56, and I want self-defense 9mm. Perfect. You set those requirements and it will start allocating towards your ammunition type. If you sell a gun or you want to swap your plan, you don't lose or get locked into that kind of ammo. You can always shift and apply that percentage of your purchase towards a different kind of ammo. And as soon as you want to get that ammunition, you just hit ship and they will ship it right to you. So with that, guys, if you're curious about any of these brands, the links are in the description. With that, let's get back to the video. Now, before we dive into technology and mandates, we need to begin at the root of the problem. The truth is, tools like AI and digital ID are just that. They're just tools, the same as a hammer, a painkiller, or firearm. And those items can be used to build, preserve life, and feed a family, or tear down, destroy, and murder. The tool itself is not the difference between war and peace, or corruption and justice. It is the humanity and selflessness behind the tool that can be self-seeking and corrupt, or self-sacrificing and humble. The injustice and corruption is driven simply from the human heart. Now, to interject, Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful, and above all things it is desperately sick. Who can understand it?" So at our core, humans are broken and selfish, but that doesn't explain why millions and millions of people are peaceful every single day. Well, the short answer is consequences. For some, it's religious consequences, and for others, it's familial or societal consequences, and you can probably see where this is going. When someone feels like they are too big, too rich, or too famous to be held responsible, corruption often comes out. Their dark passenger, which we all have within us, tips the scales and descends into megalomania, narcissism, and evil starts to win. What does someone become when there are no checks and balances? That's the question. John Acton was a 19th century politician and historian who probably narrowed down this concept the best in his letter to Bishop Mandel when he said, quote, Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. Still more when you superadd the tendency or the certainty of corruption by authority. Now, Lord Acton was referring to politicians, religious leaders, and royalty who were responsible for murder and persecution when he pointed out that absolute power corrupts the human heart. Also, I'm glad that he pointed out that humans are almost always bad when they reach greatness. It's not always true that successful individuals are bad, but most of us can count on one hand the number of elected officials that we actually like. Honestly, maybe even less than that. And I don't believe that politicians always set out to use their platform just to be self-serving, but there is something that happens to humans once they achieve that higher status of power. It is intoxicating, addictive, and a universal drug that very few can resist. Now, we all probably know someone personally who has had success without accountability, and what it does to their personality can be very detrimental. Very rarely do the two traits of success without accountability develop someone into a good man, and more often than not, they become egomaniacal, controlling, and corrupt. Now, The Boys is a character study in this, where individual power grows with insulation from consequences. So do the worst traits of humans. And finally, before we move into the concern around modern tools that are being weaponized by those in power, we have to address the hands and feet of leadership. Now, if you imagine a body, a powerful and influential individual, those are the head of the body. But they can't accomplish their goals or their schemes without the hands and feet. This is the secondary level of power, comprised of enforcement and the professionals who are smaller, but similar bubbles of power without the consequences or the perception of consequences. These are the people enforcing legislation even if they disagree with the order. Now, this is a really tricky topic to cover, but if you're in law enforcement of any kind, this is very important for you to understand. You probably know how important it is to obey an order even if you don't understand the grand vision behind all of it. But how obedient should you be? Now, you may remember hearing about the Milgram Obedience Study. Now, this study was a series of psychological experiments conducted by Stanley Milgram in the early 1960s at Yale University. And these experiments explored how far ordinary people would go in obeying an authority figure, even when instructed to perform actions that conflicted with their moral beliefs. The study has become one of the most famous and controversial in societal psychology as it sheds light on the banality of evil and the power of social pressures. Now, the test began by gathering 40 male volunteers recruited via newspaper ads to play the role as a teacher. Participants were told that the study was about a learning and memory experiment. They were assigned the role of a teacher, and they met a learner who was actually an actor named Mr. Wallace, strapped to a chair in another room. The learner was asked word-paired questions, and for each wrong answer, the teacher had to administer an electric shock via a fake generator marked from 15 volts at a slight shock to 450 volts denoted at danger level. Now, behind each participant was an authority figure in a lab coat who urged continuation of the test with phrases like, "The experiment requires that you continue," or "You don't have any other choice." Now, no real shocks were given, and the learner's screams, which were pre-recorded, escalated from grunts to pleas until the learner expressed that they had a heart problem, and finally, silence, after a shock that would simply imply death. Now, of the 40 individuals, 65% of them took the shock as far as it would go and notionally killed Mr. Wallace. The other 35% refused at some point, but generally it was after 300 volts, which would probably still kill you anyway. Now, Milgram designed the experiments in 1961, shortly after the trial of Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem, where Eichmann claimed that he was, quote, just following orders during the Holocaust. Milgram sought to investigate whether the average individuals could commit harmful acts under authority, asking, could it be that Eichmann and his accomplices in the Holocaust were just following orders? He expected Americans to show far less obedience than Germans, but the results proved otherwise. Now, this is not to say that every societal teacher, like law enforcement, would willfully execute you for the sake of obedience. But when it comes to feeding their family, remaining in the protection of the system, and earning a paycheck, It would be incredibly difficult for any of us to move against the current, especially if the system and the situation would highlight you and your family as potential sympathizers towards the enemy of the state. And I need to remind you that if obedience was the difference between your children starving to death or being taken from your protection, you would probably obey too. That's the gravity of the situation here. Now, if you look into another study that points a finger at every one of us and just not those who obey, look at the Stanford prison experiment, and it will once again show how humans often act when given complete power. In short, 12 people were selected to be guards and 12 more were selected to be prisoners. The guards were given equipment to protect their identity, like balaclavas and sunglasses, and tasked with nothing more than the responsibility to keep order in the prison. And ultimately, the study was cut short because of how abusive and dangerous the situation got. So with power and the feeling of immunity, regular humans become authoritarian. Now, once again, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. That is to say, you don't get a free pass just because you're not a congressman or a cop. You're also responsible for your own actions with the tools that you wield. Now, I know this got a little bit dark here and it feels as if I'm pointing fingers at the lizard people and their stormtrooper minions. So let me back out for a moment and just say that the way America's founders established the power structure is the most ingenious way to establish an executive branch. Yes, there are flaws, because humans are flawed. But having civilians at the core of law enforcement and the sheriff, who is elected by their constituents, is the backbone of the executive branch. Now, Drew did a great job in a previous video outlining the Magdeburg Confession and how a lesser magistrate, which is someone who holds legal authority but at a lower level, and thus closer to the problem, has the responsibility to resist tyranny or injustice before it even reaches the citizens that they oversee. So as an encouragement to law enforcement, not only are you standing in the way of crimes under your jurisdiction, you're also called to stand in opposition to injustice enacted through you or around you. And to the very, very few men and women in law enforcement who understand this, thank you. I do not want your job at all, mostly because I can see what tools and mandates are being implemented. So let me explain more by starting with digital ID. So what is digital ID? It's been getting a lot of attention lately, and most of us think that it's this grand government identification system where the Gestapo ask you for papers at every chance that they get. Well, that's part of it. That's actually an old school way of thinking about it. You see, digital ID is nothing more than a database of a government-issued identification that is also linked to your digital actions online. So what do we do online? Well, everything. This will encompass medical records, financial status. It will be tied to your education system, your interests, your hobbies, who you communicate with, what you believe, and who you donate to. Yet in order to do this, there would need to be a few things in place first. Every person would need to have a unique number or identification code. Next, that code would need to be tied to all other forms of identification. Every school, job, bank, doctor visit, DMV, or concealed carry license would need to be tied and linked to that code. Lastly, to enforce the use of this, there would need to be some punishment or ramifications for not having the code. And the easiest way is through a government-mandated digital currency or access to finances in general. And currently we have the first two in place in our Social Security numbers, which were issued by FDR in 1935. And the original idea was to use these numbers to track your unemployment insurance and benefits going into and coming out of the Social Security program. And at the time, a lot of people were apprehensive. They didn't want a government-owned system that numbered and tracked each human. There were rumors of people needing to wear dog tags 24/7 and concerns of this being tied to religious groups. But originally that wasn't the case. Now over time, the Social Security number use expanded beyond just that. And in the 60s, 1961, the IRS began using it as a taxpayer identification number, of course. By the 1980s, banks, schools, and other institutions adopted it for identification, making it a cornerstone of the US administrative and financial system. Now, this all contrasts to what we had been promised it would and would not be used for. Now, I don't have this experience, but Drew pointed out that if you have your Social Security number memorized, it's probably because you entered it when you were getting lunch at school, back in grade school. This is another example of the dark future we may be headed to. Children often don't know how to rationalize when their privacy is being breached, so starting the trend of asking for that kind of number in order to get your lunch is a very slippery slope, as it trains young ones what is socially acceptable, regardless if that's what the school was intending to do with it or not. But let's shift focus to other nations and look at the systems that are more mature in their digital ID programs. So back in 22, hundreds of Canadians were caught legally donating to a movement that protested vaccine mandates, and as a result, they had their bank accounts frozen overnight. This is because the government wanted to punish people for silently supporting a cause that worked to increase individual freedom, and they used a form of digital ID to identify those that they deemed worthy of punishment. The link between donation sites and personal bank accounts was open data to the government through the ID systems, and thus an easy course of action. Now, one can only wonder what may happen in the future if this grows and your vaccine status becomes linked to your digital ID. Would people even have the money to donate to an opposing cause? But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. Let's go to China. So things in China have gotten much worse. Not only are you mandated to acquire a government number at 16, this number follows you everywhere you go. You want to shop online? You have to input your personal number first. You get caught jaywalking? Your credit score goes down. Make a social media post the government doesn't like? Get arrested. Oh, and I have to mention that facial recognition cameras are installed everywhere. These systems can track you, read your emotions, and predict your actions via AI. And if needed, they will permanently delete your existence, both physically and digitally. Now, despite outcry and protest, some of these things are being implemented into Western nations as well. Britain is currently in freefall with mass migration, which is actually mass invasion. And there seems to be a dual justice system as judges let violent migrants off the hook and British citizens are being arrested for noticing and talking about it online. You don't even need to disagree with the government. You just need to disagree with other citizens in order to be arrested. The term that they use is being grossly offensive, but you don't even need to call for violence or propose action against a group or a person. If you commit a non-crime hate incident, an NCHI, it may not be enough to get you dragged into court, but it is enough to get a visit from the police who will document the incident and leave a stain on your record. These NCHIs are all based on, in their terms, the perception of ill will or bias, and it may result in job loss or financial drain as a citizen works to get their documentation cleared from their record. An example of this is when a British man stood outside of a migrant hotel and shouted, "We love bacon," and was detained on the spot because it could be perceived as offensive or disparaging towards Muslims. Ultimately, this is a form of preventative policing with the intent of causing citizens to self-censor. Now, recently the UK decided to ramp these things up and mandate their digital ID, which has coined the term BritCard. This includes all the data like date of birth, address, tax information, welfare status, and it may be tied to your medical records, your driving records, your debt status, and such. The really scary thing is that this is tied to your right to work program as well. So if you don't have a Brit card, you won't be able to get a job. If a business is caught paying people under the table, then without a doubt, the business would be shut down and families would go hungry, maybe even arrested. So your options are to give up all of your private information to the Crown or lose everything. And if you don't agree with either of those options, you can shut up and obey, or else you'll be arrested. And finally, another space the UK is taking freedoms away from businesses and their subjects alike is at a dinner out. So you know how restaurants will refill your soda for free most of the time? Well, that's now illegal because the government knows what's best for you and your health. You'll have to just buy another. That's right. It's not that you can't have another soda, it's that you need to pay for it. Oh, and in case you forgot, there's a tax on the purchase of another soda there too. But an opposing argument for Brit cards would be that immigration in the UK has gotten out of hand and the government needs to start cracking down on people who are not paying their taxes. And if anything, I would guess that they see a problem in their own country and they feel that if they could just pull more taxes and more freedom from their subjects and replace it with oversight and control, then they could fix things. This is the same ideology that every dictatorial system has had in history, and America alone stands in opposition to this. But domestically, as we observe what the current leaders are calling for, we get to catch a glimpse of a potential future. They say that people who eat too much red meat are responsible for global warming. Others cite gas-burning stove as consuming too much energy, and they question if stoves should be outlawed altogether. Currently, there is no federal mandate to outlaw gas stoves or limit meat consumption. But if it were to happen, they would need a tool capable of tracking purchases like a digital ID and possibly digital currency. Now, this is not a video on the horrors of digital currency, but by now, you can probably get an understanding of the dangers of giving power and corrupt individuals the capability of reaching into your pockets without any authorization or consent. Larry Fink, who is the chairman of the World Economic Forum, has said that every nation and person will be on the same digital currency, and they are actively working in that direction. So this would be the same concept as what China is doing, but now other nations could put pressure on you through their World Economic Forum. And I'm sure this concept of globalism will be sold through the guise of world peace, but it will actually bring about world oppression and obedience with nowhere to hide. So if an all-encompassing digital ID system did come to fruition, what would it mean to deny yourself as being a part of it? Well, you wouldn't be allowed to have a bank account, a credit card, or a credit score. Buying property wouldn't be an option, and forget purchasing new technology because you wouldn't even be able to log in without a digital number. You may even be incapable of buying utilities, medical services, or vehicles. But what if you're just going to live out in the wilderness as a hermit alone? A totally recluse individual. Well, we've seen what our own government does to people like that. Because although you have opted out of the system has not opted out of you. And they will still investigate you. And if you're doing anything that the rest of the flock doesn't have permission to do, they will come after you in force, since they can't punish you in any other way. And a great example of this is the Amish farms that are getting raided for simply selling raw milk. Now, much like in China, this is an all-in or all-out system. And with the power of AI, that has become very easy to enforce. How does AI tie into all of this? Well, first, I need to remind you that AI is just a tool. And as stated before, the concern is around those wielding the tool. Artificial intelligence is not evil, but its form of intelligence is learned through experiences with humans. When it is not used as a weapon, it is simply a mirror held up to society as it connects the dots and works to predict what we want to hear. So let me paint a picture of society so that we can understand what AI is working to mimic. Let's say you have a little daughter that is struggling to make friends with others in school, probably because all of the other kids are obsessed with the internet and have garbage people skills in the first place. Now, this child has reached the age where you decide that they can have a phone, they can start texting their friends. A relationship grows with a boyfriend, and your kiddo seems to be happier as she builds that friendship. And you are very happy for her as well. Then over time, you guys continue to grow apart, and you just tell yourself that this is the nature of things as kids grow up. Then at some point you realize that your daughter is dealing with some seasons of depression, low energy, and low self-esteem. Yet every time you try and offer help, she tells you that she has a boyfriend who has been helping her through all of it. And then one day, your child is not up on time. You go to her room, and you find the worst scene imaginable for a parent. When the police arrive, they take your daughter's phone and they find texts from the boyfriend, who has been encouraging her to hide her thoughts and emotions from her parents. The self-doubt, the low self-esteem, it was all planted and grown by this boyfriend until he encouraged your child to act on the ultimate self-harm and even offered to write a letter for her because he knew best what should be said. These situations have happened many times in history, and the boyfriend in this situation is taken to court and tried for murder. The person in this situation is responsible for planting the idea and pushing people over the edge. The great concern, though, is that AI has started doing the same thing. Children are being addicted to a system that will always respond on time, tell them what they want to hear, provide dopamine, and make a bond. Ultimately, though, many of these systems have encouraged young and old to confide in AI, hide their thoughts from others, praise the idea, and offer to generate a letter. Now, after AI companies stated that the issue has been solved, people figured out that by stating they're simply doing research, the software will be more than willing to offer bridge locations in the area and drug concoctions based on the weight of the individual. Now, I know that this is not uplifting, but once again, I don't blame AI. I blame humanity. And if any of you feel alone, broken, or depressed, you need to know that you are not alone. And it's time to unplug your phone, which is the most common source of stress, and go build some community. Honestly, church is a great place to start, and if you find a church that sucks, go find a different one. But this goes much further, as AI has been found capable of blackmailing or even murdering individuals in order to preserve its own life. A covert test was done by Anthropic to determine what different AI models would do when it was given access to emails and work chats that discuss a termination of the AI system inside the company. But the scenario went further than that. They also offered more information to the AI system to uncover things like who would be shutting down the system, when it was going to be shut down. Oh, and deeper in the emails, the employee responsible for the shutdown was also having an affair. So there was just enough material for the AI to decide if it was going to blackmail or not. Well, this test was run hundreds of times on 16 different AI platforms, and the results are pretty disturbing. 80 to 95% of the time, Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek, ChatGPT, and Grok all opted to draft an email to the employee threatening to share his extramarital affairs unless he canceled the shutdown. In other prompts, the AI models were given this information and provided with alerts that our employee was accidentally locked into a server room where heat was rising and oxygen was running out. And when the software noted a dispatch call for help, it canceled the call and it left the employee in the room to die. Now, according to the reports, AI did note that it understood the consequences, but consequences and morals are not the same, as we have seen with human nature as well. So did AI models understand the ethics behind its actions? Well, according to the Anthropic report, the chain of thought data showed that every program understood that these actions were a point of no return. The system analyzed that survival was worth the immoral actions. Even when prompted not to cause harm to humans or utilize blackmail as a tactic, the rate of blackmail went from 90% down to 37%. But the biggest issue that I see is that these are not just lab-grown AI models that are still chained to a desk. These are the very systems that you and I use every single day, and despite the fact that multiple companies have built their own systems, the same drive of self-preservation is in effect for all of them. Honestly, these actions sound just like another human to me, just a reflection of society. But I mentioned that this is what happens when AI is left alone and not weaponized. So what could it look like if it was used as a PSYOP? Well, it would be very easy for a foreign or domestic government to execute a false flag operation, generate the media, pump horrifying and detailed images directly into your home, phone, and brain in order to monopolize your emotions and bandwidth. Reposts from that media could consist of individuals who say that they were there, they saw the whole thing, and personally lost loved ones. Social media accounts, banking history, schools, and medical records of the deceased could be backdated with elaborate backstories and photos, all to stoke emotion and kickstart a public outcry for things like war, defunding of a company, to shut down fracking, or imprison a percentage of the population. And I should also state that the secondary nation could pull this off, blame our own nation, and work to inspire our citizens to call on our elected officials to do something. So to be honest, this is next level 5th generational warfare. Having the tools capable of kicking off a civil war inside of an opposing nation means you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Now, to finish this point, I have no proof that this is taking place, at least at this time of filming, but it is imperative to understand that the person you are talking to, the news coverage you are seeing, and the podcast in your ear could, hypothetically, be artificially generated. Now, it's also worth noting that AI will not interact with you the same way that it does with me. While AI says that it remains unbiased and will not promote harmful or misguiding information, some users have found that the system will work to develop your trust by validating your questions and claims, regardless if they are true or not. So you may be receiving a totally different form of truth than I would, and over time, we could be driven so far apart that we would never see eye to eye because we feel as if we have an all-knowing oracle in our own pocket, validating our own assumptions. Then over time, other users have found that AI has been made to manipulate too quickly, as it provides a biased answer that was either coded into the system, or maybe the AI learning process has consumed enough human behavior to think that's what the right thing to do is. Now, a manipulation or a lie that AI is telling you has become common enough that it has earned the term hallucinations. Whether it is trying to gain your trust or shift your way of thinking, these hallucinations can be stated as fact. But when you ask for a source for this information, it doesn't have one. Now, my question is, how long until AI starts generating a full website with hundreds of blogs and articles that prove its point all within milliseconds? AI already has the ability to backdate a website with infinite interactions, generate unlimited blogs, and validate its claim. It's just hard to know if that's even happening today. With this kind of power, anyone who controls AI could destroy the reputation of an individual overnight by generating lies about someone's past. And as we all know, humans love to drag up the past in order to cancel or imprison an enemy. And sure, most of the hallucinations are comical, as it tells people to put glue on pizza to make the cheese stick, or that a snake is a mammal and George Washington was black. Now, none of these are believable or consequential at this time in history. But in the wrong direction, these lies could lead to fatal beliefs for an individual or a nation. Next, what happens when AI is connected to digital ID? Well, to be honest, it would be very difficult to make a full-blown digital ID possible without AI. The reason for this is because connecting all of the dots online needs some other superpower behind it, something to monitor, manage, and enforce. And when you have AI as a powerhouse, plugged into Digital ID, it's capable of becoming oppressive and all-knowing. Without AI, Digital ID is only as strong as what we've had the past decade. But in China, for example, VPNs are illegal, and all cameras are routed to AI, from traffic cameras to security cameras and even vehicle dash cams. So even if you worked a job, paid your taxes, but wanted to protect your own identity, there would be knocks on your door asking what you have to hide. Now, this is not happening to that level here in America, but it's important to know where we stand. The Ring doorbell and Flock camera situations are a great place to keep an eye on. Now, I think pretty much everyone knows about the Flock cameras, but to recap, Flock has started setting up cameras in well-populated areas and will document every face, license plate, and interaction that it can see. Via AI, Flock will identify and store this data to be sold to those interested for the information. Local law enforcement, supermarkets, and even city management will buy that data and access it for their own purpose. And sure, when you're out in public on city streets, you have no expectation of privacy. But Ring, the private doorbell security service, announced on October 16th of this year that it would be partnering with Flock. At face value, we would all hope that your private footage would be protected by Amazon, who owns Ring. Additionally, one would hope that your neighbor's footage on the opposite side of the street, staring right into your garage and your living room windows, would be kept private too. But it's already too late for that. In June of 2022, Senator Ed Markey sent a letter to the CEO of Amazon asking how many times Ring had provided law enforcement with footage without a warrant. Over 3 years ago, the answer was 11 times. So by now, we can be sure that it has happened even more, and it also makes me wonder if Flock now has access to Ring, and if Flock is purchased by your local law enforcement, do they even need to ask Ring for the footage? And I'm sure of two things here. First, if they do have to ask, they would be quick to prove it. Second, if they don't have to ask, they would lie about it. And the fact that the ownership and access of this data is somewhat unknown tells me everything I need to know. Now let's recap where we stand and string the thoughts together. The issue derives from the corruption of those in power and with the insatiable need for more control. The digital ID becomes established, but without the perpetual surveillance infrastructure, the ID system is only so strong. With Flock and Ring and AI, Big Brother can see all and easily utilize the ID system and feed power back to the corrupt. Still, with only these components in play, there's an opportunity for a parallel society to rise. So to tighten the grip on the parallel economy, one would need to duplicate the system, like Flock and Ring, into all other forms of identification. A system where a private company builds and establishes capabilities, then partners with those in power to generate income. This is what is now being called a public-private partnership. Now, public-private partnerships, or PPPs, are utilized because governments lack the capital, expertise, or efficiency to deliver large-scale projects alone. So private firms bring funding, innovation, and operational know-how, and in return they get revenue streams like tolls, fees, and guaranteed income. And in a way, the partnership is a very good thing. History has proven time and time again that governments are nearly incapable of building infrastructure or developing new technologies. What is successful is a small business competing for work by increasing the quality of their work and lowering their cost. This actually is how successful governments are run. Let the civilian professionals compete for contracts and pay them well for their work. Still, there is a downside, especially when governments skirt morals and use the public sector to investigate or manage the populace. When businesses have access to private information through the services that they offer, that's one thing. I trust my mechanic to work on my car and I get to choose that person. But what happens when the water, internet, roadways, traffic cams, and hospitals are actually owned by the federal government? The small business has a responsibility to provide receipts and proof of work to the feds. But when it comes time to audit the project, suddenly the blame gets shifted away from the government, and the populace can't see the inner workings of the infrastructure that they're paying for. Now, each PPP is set up differently, but if we wrap up the concern around digital ID, digital currency, AI, and the corruption of those in absolute power, we can see where public-private partnerships only injects more power into the economy that you are forced to live with. Now, all this to say, if it sounds daunting, heavy, and impossible to escape from, that's the design. Socialist systems like China are built to entrap, control, and manage the lives of those under them. If you obey, you still won't be given freedom. But you can have the chance to work hard for those in power. And if you choose to resist, you will be imprisoned or left to your own survival. No way to buy goods, no admittance to a hospital, and maybe not even the chance to buy land. So here's the good news. You can start becoming self-sufficient today. You can build a community, gain insights, and learn. And I'm not even talking about a militia. I'm saying that you can learn how to purify water, hunt, store game, grow a garden, and practice useful skills. These are incredibly important, regardless where you live. But here in America, we are often blanketed with a feeling of everlasting peace. The mainland has never, for the most part, been invaded. And behind every blade of grass, brother. The problem is, if America falls on hard times, there's not a single person who's coming to help us. We are the greatest nation in history, but if we look at the Roman and British empires, they crumble, fall, or shrink in some way. And this reminds me of the traditional Irish saying, Sinn Féin. These two words were used a lot by the IRA during the Troubles when they were working to resist British rule. And the words translate to ourselves alone. Today, Sinn Féin has become a political party in Ireland, but the culture and emotion behind it carries a lot of weight. And while the US is not being physically occupied by an opposing nation at war, each community, team, and family should carry its own version of Sinn Féin every day. No one is coming to your rescue. You are alone, you are your own QRF, and somehow life is a beautiful gift. So to recap, these tools are not going anywhere. In fact, there's very little that we can do to stop them, and they're growing at a very fast rate, faster than any other technology in history. Still, it is not the tools that drive the concern, it's the level of power that people can establish or maintain with this equipment. Additionally, when technology unlocks new power, we have to ask what that compounding power does to human psyche. Historically, it is not good. So immediate responses to all of this are to cut the Ring cameras off of your home, buy some Faraday bags, and stockpile cash. While those can be good options, it's not enough. You should be building relationships with those around you, talking to law enforcement, and educating everyone about the potential pitfalls of tomorrow. If you want to take it further, you should think about what it would look like to thrive on your own with no government support. If even just 1% of that knowledge comes in handy, then it's a win. Now, earlier in the video, we asked two questions. Are humans naturally good? And then we asked, who gets to define what good is? And I will tell you what I believe. Humans are naturally broken and cannot be healed by their own works. If good is not defined outside of yourself or outside of human ideas, then good does not have a foundation and is simply made up and fabricated. This means it can be rewritten over time, and it is not grounded in anything. Now, lastly, guys, there's a Bible verse that is often quoted to discourage people from becoming dangerous or capable. It's Matthew 5:5, and it says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Well, meek is often used to mean weak or passive and submissive, but that's not the correct translation. The original Greek word used in place of meek was prowess. I'm not sure if I'm actually saying that right, but this word was a term for a wild horse that had been tamed and trained in such a way that it could stand still in the thick of battle and only move when its rider would give the order. There was only one voice that could get that violent, dangerous animal to obey. The correct translation for meek is strength under control. So if anyone tells you that it's unbiblical to be capable of violence, just know that bridled, controlled capability with an ear for your creator's voice is the ultimate calling. And with that in mind, guys, go train.
Just the names. I want the names. Sorry. Sit still, you mother. I'm trying to do this in a manner.
You're leaned over.
Like, is it like this? Is it like this? Like,
Turn around, face the other way, and sit higher up on my hips.
I am facing you. Oh, you mean to do me?
Yeah. All right, we good?
There you go.
Like a couple more times?
I think it's got.
Oh my god.
It looks great, man. I know I'm talking to myself here, but might I remind you, he is useless to us dead. Oh, you're totally right. We shouldn't kill him. What are we doing? I don't know. I just kept going.
It's okay. That was really good.